In this lesson, we're going to add assets to a composition. So to follow along, go to Working Files and After Effects Projects and double-click on 0402, Adding Assets. That opens up a project with a half a dozen assets already in it, but no composition. I'm doing this on purpose because I wanted to just remind you about making new compositions. If you look at the assets, we've got a still there of that shot, and another still, both of which I just lifted from some video that I shot of these folks playing tennis. Actually, that's an instructor working with a student. This is one of those video clips that I shot, a wider shot. That'll be the background, the basis for this composition. And I have this tennis ball with a transparency behind it, a TIFF file. This text that I created in Photoshop and have a transparent background there as well. This is a TIFF file as well, and then some music. So the object here is to put these things on top of some kind of a background clip, and this tennis background is obviously the thing we're going to use as the basis for this comp. And so usually you want the thing that's the basis, the foundation for your comp, to be the size of the comp. So we're going to use this guy to then create our composition. So there are two ways to automatically create a composition from an asset like this, as I've mentioned before. You can right-click and say New Comp from Selection, or just drag it down to this New Comp button down there, and there we go. There's a new comp. It's named based upon the file that you used. So it's called Tennis Background. You can always change the name. Nevertheless, here it is, and there's that video inside the comp. It's in this layer number 1 right now. If I just play this, you'll see just these guys knocking the ball back and forth there. There you go. You can drag through it as well. All right, let's add some assets to this composition. Let's add music first, because it really doesn't make a difference where the music resides here in terms of its position, which layer it's on. So I'll take the music, just drag it down to the composition. That adds it automatically. And you can see the music is much longer than the comp. The music is 1:28 versus 10 seconds for the comp. If I click on the layer here, I can slide it back and forth. You can see it's much bigger than the composition. We're going to worry about trimming things and that kind of stuff in other lessons. But I just want to show you that you can add an audio file like that, even though it's much longer than the composition itself. All right, let's add some other things, and I want them to appear on top of this background. So let's start off by adding, let's say, this tennis ball. So this tennis ball is 1024 by 768, which is smaller than 1920 by 1080, but it's still pretty big. So we can add this to this composition by simply dragging it down here. And where we place it will be where it appears on the screen. Notice the black line that appears there as I drag it around. If I drag it to the bottom, it'll be below the video. Can't see it because it's hidden by the video. I could take the video and move it out of the way, and there's the tennis ball. You don't want that, though. I'll do Control-Command-Z to undo that move. So to put it on top, I can just take it here and drag it around, and notice this little black line appears. That's where it's going to go. It'll go above music, but below tennis. That's not what we want. It goes here on the top. There we go. That'll be on top. Kind of large, I know. I'm going to talk about scale and other things in upcoming lessons, but just a real quick thing here. Just grab a bounding box corner. You can drag it around. Notice that as you drag it around, you're contorting the aspect ratio, the relative proportions there. You can always hold on the Shift key after you start changing the scale, and that'll constrain the proportions like that. Okay, now we got it shrunk down. You can also grab inside here and move it around like that. Now we got that guy on top. Let's bring in some images. Now, these images are exactly the same size as the frame behind them, so we'll deal with that in a second. I'll take this image and drag it down above the tennis background, but below the tennis ball, because I want the tennis ball to be on top of the image, so I'll click it there. Now that image is just the same size as the comp. It's 1920 by 1080, but we can change its size too. See the bounding box around there? The bounding box automatically appears when you add this new thing to the comp, so you can always start by moving it around too. And after you start changing it like this, changing its size, then you hold on the Shift key, and it constrains the proportions again. There you go. And you can move it out of the way too if you like. I can take the ball here, and you can see the ball is above it here in the composition. Take the ball over here, you see it's also above it in terms of how you see it. Okay. Let's add this other tennis still here. Instead of dragging it down here, I'm going to drag it over here to the composition panel. Let's drag it over here like that. And you see it kind of lines up. It gives you little borders saying where it's going to go. It locks itself if it goes to the full screen like that. If you pull it down, it'll be positioned down here like that. I'll let it go like that, and you can see that it shows up below here. It's still 1920 by 1080, but it's just kind of moved down off the side here. Let's change its size by scaling it down like so, and hold down the Shift key now, and we'll constrain the proportions like that. There we go. Put it over here. Up, it's on top of the ball. Is that what we want? Well, we can just change the ball here above the image. There it is. Okay. One more thing to add, and that's the text. I'll just take a look at the text before I add it. I'm going to double click it, and that opens up here in the footage panel. You can see that it has text with some transparency. If you don't have transparency as you're looking at it, that's because this little button isn't clicked. If it looks like that, that's because you got the transparency turned off down here inside the footage panel. When you view something directly from the project panel by double-clicking it, it opens up here in the footage panel. It looks for all the world like the comp panel, but it's the footage panel. It's kind of like a preview panel. Click on this guy to turn on the transparency again. Okay, there we go. If I drag here, that doesn't work. But if I drag over here, I can bring it in that way. But what I want to do is position it on top of the composition. So I'm going to go back here to the composition panel, this little tab there in the upper left-hand corner. Click on that. And I'm going to drag the text over here, and I can see where it's going to be positioned. Now, the text frame size is as big as the frame for the entire clip. It's 1920 by 1080. But the text itself is not. I'm going to drag it around a bit here like this. Let's say we want the text, which is centered in this thing, to be down toward the bottom like that. And there it is. Of course, you can always move it later. There you go. If I want the ball to fit in there, I can click on the ball and move it over. But notice when I click on the ball, it doesn't necessarily select. That's because I'm inside the frame of the tennis. I click outside here and click on the ball. It's still hard to do. Click on the ball this way, and now we got it selected. Bring it over there like that. Change its size. Maybe we want the ball to be on top instead of the other one, so take the ball above the text. There you go. And now we've got things ordered. It's not necessarily laid out exactly the way we want it to be done when we're done, but you can see how you can add assets here to this composition. I'm going to talk about how you create layers from scratch inside a composition in the next lesson.